Thank you so much for popping by to watch my video. Grab yourself a drink, sit back, and get ready for 5 powerful stories about innocent people who were wrongfully sentenced to death row. Number 1. Name: Clemente Aguirre Jarquin. Charge: double homicide and burglary. Time of death: row 10 years. On June 17th, 2004, 47-year-old Cheryl Williams and 68-year-old Carol Barais were found stabbed to death in their home in Altamonte Springs, Florida. Williams was stabbed more than 100 times and Barais was stabbed twice. Police found a bloody 10-inch kitchen knife between their house and the house next door. Williams' daughter, Samantha Williams, immediately said she had a gut feeling that the murderer was 24-year-old Clemente Aguirre Jarquin, who lived next door. Aguirre Jarquin is a Honduran immigrant who washed dishes and prepped food at a restaurant. Police questioned Aguirre Jarquin and his roommate, but they knew nothing about the crimes. However, Aguirre Jarquin, shortly after, admitted that he had gone next door to get some beer the night before and saw the dead bodies. He was arrested for tampering with evidence. When police learned that the knife resembled knives from Aguirre Jarquin's restaurant and that the restaurant was missing a 10-inch knife, he was charged with first-degree murder and burglary. Aguirre Jarquin went to trial in 2006, where experts testified that 64 of the 67 bloody footprints in the home matched his shoes, that blood splatter from Cheryl Williams and Barais were on clothes found in a plastic bag in Aguirre Jarquin's home, and that Aguirre Jarquin's fingerprint was on the knife. Aguirre Jarquin told the jury that on the night of the murder, he went through the front door that is always unlocked to ask for some beer. He found Cheryl Williams' body and tried to revive her. He then saw Barais' body in the next room and feared the killer could still be in the house. So he grabbed the knife near Cheryl Williams' body. After looking around and not finding the killer, he ran home, tossed the knife, put his clothes in a bag and cleaned himself off. He did not call the cops because he was not a citizen and feared deportation. Aguirre Jarquin was convicted of 2 first-degree murders and burglary, and he was sentenced to death. In 2011, the Innocence Project sought DNA testing of the more than 80 pieces of evidence. The results excluded Aguirre Jarquin as the source of the DNA. Further, Samantha Williams' DNA was found in 8 locations that were consistent with her being the attacker. Samantha Williams later admitted to killing her mom and Barais. Further, a forensic scientist found that the blood on Aguirre Jarquin's clothes was not blood splatter, but rather consistent with him trying to revive the women. After a lengthy battle, the Florida Supreme Court granted Aguirre Jarquin a new trial in October 2016. A mistrial was declared during jury selection, and in the second trial, the prosecution abruptly dismissed the charges while jury selection was still in progress. Aguirre Jarkin was released on a federal immigration court bond after the Department of Homeland Security placed an immigration hold on him. He is currently seeking asylum. Aguirre Jarkin grew up in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, where he personally witnessed at least 3 murders. He and his friends estimated that a murder of someone they knew occurred at least once a month. He came to America to escape the prolific gang presence. A man fled his home country after witnessing brutal murders first-hand seeking safety, only to be arrested and wrongfully sentenced to death row. But thanks to the Innocence Project and DNA evidence, his innocence was finally proven. What this poor man must have endured is truly tragic. Number 2. Name: Jimmy Dennis. Charge: homicide. Time on death row: 25 years. Jimmy Dennis spent 25 years on death row for the 1991 murder of 17-year-old Chadell Williams. Williams was wearing her favourite pair of gold figure-8 shaped earrings. Her mum worried about her wearing them because she had already been robbed at gunpoint for them. Her boyfriend paid the robbers $100 to give them back. On an October day after school, Williams and her friend Zara Howard were approached by 2 men as they ascended the stairs at the Fern Rock bus station in Philadelphia. The men demanded Williams' earrings. The girls ran out of the bus station. Howard heard a gunshot and saw Williams fall to the ground. Neither the gun nor the earrings were ever recovered. Dennis became a suspect because someone told police that it was Jimmy from the Abbotsford Projects who killed Williams. As police followed the lead, they learned that the tipster heard the information from someone who heard it from someone else. It was a rumour on top of a rumour, but police pursued the lead. Dennis was confident he would not be wrongfully convicted because he had a solid alibi. He was on a bus across town during the murder, and he had waved to one of his neighbours from the bus. Dennis was ultimately charged with Williams' first-degree murder, convicted, and sentenced to death. Dennis was freed in May 2017. His conviction was overturned based on 3 Brady violations. 1. Howard's implicated 2 of her fellow classmates in the murder, specifically indicating that she recognised them, but the prosecution failed to investigate them or tell the defence about them. 2. A convicted person in the Montgomery County Correctional Facility reached out to police because one of the perpetrators called him and bragged about committing the murder with 2 other people. He gave police the names and addresses of the perpetrators and the description of the getaway car, but they never followed up or told the defence about them. And 3. The state had a receipt that helped establish Dennis's alibi that they never turned over. Dennis told Philadelphia Magazine that his worst day on death row was when a guard abruptly opened his cell door and yelled, "Your dad died," and then walked away. Dennis's dad, James Murray, died from Alzheimer's disease. Before his diagnosis, Murray would drive Dennis's mum and 2 daughters on a 10-hour round trip to visit Dennis once a month. Throughout Murray's illness, Dennis was essentially cut off from his family and unable to help because of his wrongful incarceration on death row. Also, while facing death for a crime he did not commit, he missed his daughters growing up. They were just 1 and 4 years old when he was wrongfully convicted. While too young to fully comprehend what was happening, Dennis told Philadelphia Magazine that they both cried when the guilty verdict was read. They are now grown, and one has a child. He calls to check in on them every day and visits them when he can. He told Philadelphia Magazine that he is careful to drive below the speed limit, and that he avoids staying out too late because he is terrified of anything that might result in a police encounter. This case breaks my heart. This poor man, forever scarred by the injustice he endured, now avoids going out at certain times and drives cautiously, fearing another wrongful encounter with the system he no longer trusts. He's missed so many precious moments with his children, birthdays, school proms, even tucking them into bed, things we often take for granted, but that he would have given anything to experience. Though thankfully, now he can try to live his life the best he can. Please show love in the comments, giving some prayer emojis. Thank you. Number 3. Name Troy Davis. Charge homicide. Time on death row, 20 years. On August 19th, 1989, Savannah, Georgia, police officer Mark McPhail intervened in an altercation between 2 men at a park and was shot twice and killed. A man named Sylvester Coles was present at the shooting and implicated Troy Davis. 9 other people who were at the park joined Cole in pointing the finger at Davis. Davis admitted to being at the park. He said that he saw Coles attacking a man, but that he left before the shooting took place. No physical evidence connected Davis to the crime, but a jury convicted him and recommended the death penalty based on the 9 eyewitness accounts in August 1991. In September 2003, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution newspaper published a series of stories in which 7 of the 9 eyewitnesses recant their testimonies. Many of them told the newspaper that police pressured them to implicate Davis, and that it was actually Coles who shot McPhail. On July 16, 2007, the Georgia Board of Pardons and Paroles granted Davis a 90-day stay of execution, just 1 day before he was scheduled to be executed. At his second execution date, the Supreme Court of the United States delayed the execution just 2 hours before it was scheduled, pending its decision to hear the case. They ultimately decided not to hear the case, and 3 days before his third execution date, the Georgia Court of Appeals stayed the execution to allow for a new petition. Several failed appeals later, they set a 4th execution date for September 21st, 2011. Public figures around the world, including Jimmy Carter and Pope Benedict XVI, called for a stay of execution. But Troy was executed 4 hours late when SCOTUS announced its decision to refuse to grant the stay. Before his execution, he told his sister, Kimberly Davis, that he wanted her to continue fighting to clear his name and end the death penalty. She has committed her life to campaigning around the country to end the death penalty in every state. What do you think, YouTube viewers? In this case, there was no evidence to prove his guilt, yet 9 people, including himself, admitted he was at the park. So to me, it raises the question, could it have been any one of the 9 people there who actually committed the shooting? Number 4. Name Cameron Todd Willingham. Charge triple homicide and arson. Time of death row 12 years. In 1991 in Corsicana, Texas, 23-year-old Cameron Todd Willingham's home set fire early in the morning. Willingham, his 1-year-old twins, Cameron and Carmen, and his 2-year-old Amber, were all inside. Willingham was observed doing everything he could to get inside to rescue his daughters, but he was unable to. Even as firefighters arrived, Willingham was attempting to get in, and ultimately had to be restrained in handcuffs for his own safety. One firefighter told The New Yorker that it would have been crazy for anyone to go into the house based on the severity of the fire. The 3 children died from smoke inhalation. Willingham's wife, 22-year-old Stacy Kuykendall, who had left the house early on the morning of the fire, worked at a bar, and Willingham was an unemployed auto mechanic. The small town, which was about 55 miles north of Waco, collected money to help the Willinghams pay for the funerals. Douglas Fogg, the assistant fire chief in Corsicana, and Manuel Vasquez, a deputy fire marshal, investigated the fire. Their findings were that someone poured liquid accelerant in the children's room, under each of their beds, and then down the hallway towards the front door. They called it a fire barrier and concluded that the accelerant was deliberately poured so that no one could escape. A lab found mineral spirits, a substance often used in lighter fluid, in one of the samples of burned materials from the house. Just like that, the tragic fire became a triple homicide. The closest thing the prosecution had to a motive was that Willingham had Iron Maiden and Led Zeppelin posters in his house, which a family counsellor who had never met Willingham testified indicated an interest in satanic type activities. Willingham was convicted of murdering his 3 girls and sentenced to death. Before Willingham's execution, his attorney enlisted Dr. Gerald Hurst, an acclaimed scientist and fire investigator, to review the initial investigation. He had little doubt that it was an accidental fire that was likely caused by a space heater. Vasquez recalled finding the space heater off, but Stacy was sure it was on. She remembered turning it down before she left, because Amber was always putting things too close to it. Hurst told the Board of Pardons and Parole that there was no evidence of arson and that Willingham was about to be executed based on junk science. Despite receiving this report, the board unanimously voted to move forward with the execution. Willingham died by lethal injection in 2004. He requested that his parents not be present. Prior to his execution, Willingham asked them to never stop fighting to vindicate him, and to cremate his body and sprinkle some of his ashes over his children's graves. Later that year, the Chicago Tribune asked 3 fire experts to examine the original fire investigation, and they agreed with Hurst's findings. Shortly after, the Innocence Project hired 4 top fire investigators to do the same thing. They concluded that every indicator of arson that Fogg and Vasquez relied on had been proven scientifically invalid. In 2005, Texas established a commission to investigate allegations of error in forensic science. Willingham's case was the first to be reviewed. Fire scientist Craig Baylor concluded that there was no scientific basis for arson, that Fogg and Vasquez ignored evidence, relied on discredited folklore, and that their reasoning was more characteristic of mystics or psychics. Most notably, Baylor told The New Yorker that the investigation violated not only the standards of today, but even of the time period. Kuykendall was essentially the only surviving member of the family. She has remained mostly silent, but told the Huffington Post in 2012, "My girls would have been 23 and 21 years old today. I miss them so much. This is one of the most heartbreaking cases I've researched. A man who desperately tried to save his children from a horrific fire only to be stopped, and the unimaginable pain he must have felt knowing he couldn't do anything to help, to then be sentenced to death by lethal injection, knowing he was innocent, and requesting to be scattered with his children, is beyond tragic." After his death, the Innocence Project hired 4 top fire investigators who found that every piece of evidence used to convict him had been scientifically proven invalid. In 2005, it was confirmed it wasn't arson. My heart goes out to his wife, mother of the children. Please leave hearts in the comments to show we care for this heartbreaking loss. Number 5. Name: Carlos de Luna. Charge: homicide. Time on death row: 6 years. Wanda Lopez was working at a roadside Shamrock convenience store in Corpus Christi, Texas in 1983 when a customer stabbed her to death. Lopez was on the phone with 911 dispatchers when she was attacked. Police rushed to the scene and discovered an eyewitness who saw the attacker leave the store. The description that went out was Hispanic male wearing a grey sweatshirt. Police found 20-year-old Carlos de Luna a few blocks away, hiding underneath a truck. De Luna was brought to the crime scene, where the eyewitness positively identified him. De Luna told police that the perpetrator was another man named Carlos Hernandez. De Luna and Hernandez were together earlier in the night at a bar near the Shamrock. Hernandez went to the Shamrock and never returned. When De Luna walked over to the Shamrock to see what was going on, he saw Hernandez attacking the female store clerk. De Luna ran. He had a sexual assault on his record and feared getting into trouble. When he heard sirens coming towards the Shamrock, he hid under a truck where he was later found by police. No one looked into Hernandez. No physical evidence connected De Luna to the scene. He was convicted solely on the cross-racial eyewitness identification, sentenced to death, and executed in 1989 by lethal injection. Six years after De Luna's execution, James Liebman, a law professor at Columbia University, conducted one of the most thorough reviews of a death penalty case in US history, that revealed mounting evidence of DeLuna's innocence. These are Liebman's main findings, which are published in the book Los Tocayos Carlos, An Anatomy of a Wrongful Execution. The crime scene was covered in blood, but DeLuna was not. Liebman found crime scene photos that were not shown to the jury. The photos demonstrate that the crime scene was covered in blood and that there was a bloody footprint belonging to the killer. DeLuna's clothes and shoes were microscopically analysed, and not a single speck of blood was found on them. The eyewitness was not sure. Liebman tracked down Kevin Baker, the eyewitness who saw the perpetrator leaving the store, and asked how certain he was in his identification. He said about 70%, but then added that had the police not told him that they found DeLuna hiding under a truck 2 blocks away, that he would have been only 50% certain. Further, nearly 75% of the DNA exonerations involve eyewitness misidentification, approximately 42% of which are cross-racial misidentifications. Hernandez was an obvious suspect. The prosecution claimed that they looked for Hernandez but could not find him. At DeLuna's trial, they denied that Hernandez existed and called him a figment of DeLuna's imagination. In a single day, with the help of a private investigator, Liebman uncovered Hernandez's identity and criminal record. Hernandez had been arrested 39 times. Several of his crimes involved hold-ups of Corpus Christi gas stations, and he was even found cowering outside of a 7-Eleven with a knife just days before Lopez's murder. This detail never made it to DeLuna's defense attorney. Liebman also found 2 women who overheard Hernandez bragging about killing Lopez. Finally, Liebman found a previously unheard police radio tape that indicates another man was chased before they found DeLuna hiding. This man could have been Hernandez, but again, this evidence was not disclosed to DeLuna's defense team. DeLuna left behind his family, including sibling Rose Roton, who said goodbye to her brother on December 7th, 1989. "I've always known Carlos was innocent," Roton told ABC News. "It's just that we did not know how to help him." At the end he said, "I'm innocent, you're executing the wrong person." Had DeLuna been exonerated before his execution, he dreamt of working in the faith community. "If I were to get out, I think I would preach the word of God, because I've learned while being here. That's the only way I can make it now," DeLuna said shortly before his execution. Do you believe in the death row? And what crimes do you think it should be used for? Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.